Free trade is supposed to mean simply no tariffs on either imported or exported goods between countries. A tariff is another word for a tax. By using the word free, the corporate elite makes free trade seem good. After all, anything that's free is good, right? While Americans buy over 45% of China's exports, China buys less than 3% of our exports. The corporate fascists pushing globalization call this free trade. But is this fair trade? Let's take a closer look at the implications of this term, free trade, and see how high U.S. corporate taxes, European VAT tax rebates, and World Trade Organization rules conspire to make trade between the U.S. and the rest of the world anything but free.
The European Union is gaming the system against the United States. For example, when we had corporate tax rates which are relatively equal, that would be a fair trade situation. Europe has cut its tax rates, average tax rates, corporations down to 24%. Ours are 40%. That gives them an advantage. How do they make up the money? They impose value-added tax on American imports of 15% coming into Europe and rebate the tax to European corporations exporting to the United States. This has the effect of a Smoot-Hawley tariff against the United States of America. And it is the reason why we run annual massive trade deficits with Europe.
But that's not even the worst damage the corporate fascists' so-called free trade has caused. In 1993, a massive free trade bill was ushered through Congress. This trade bill was known as NAFTA, short for North American Free Trade Agreement.
What happens when you set up a free trade zone, as Hamilton set up in the United States, with the 13 states all becoming one common market, what happens is that a central government has to rise above it to enforce the laws and regulations. Hamilton set that up, and what rose out of that was the mighty American government. When the Europeans had the European Union, they made it initially a common market, a free trade zone. Gradually, this enormous government rose up of the European Union that now sits in Brussels, which is becoming a continental-wide government, and the states are losing their sovereignty and independence. If you have a global economy, then you're going to need some kind of political organization to manage and control it and enforce its rules. The beginnings of the world government already exist in the World Trade Organization, the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the new International Environmental Authority, Kyoto. All of these things are the embryonic institutions of a world government.
There definitely is a plan to consolidate the United States, Mexico, and Canada. It's more than a plan. The beginning stages already are well underway. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends on the type of government that will be created. If we had the type of constitutional republic that we were given by our forefathers, if that were in place today, and if that were the concept of the kind of a government that we were going to use in the merger of Canada and Mexico with the United States, I think it would have a lot to be said for it. I would probably be in favor of it. But that is not what's happening today. What is happening today is the merger of these three countries into a collectivist super-regional government. By collectivist, I mean it will be totalitarian in nature. There will be very little room for individual rights. It'll all be dictated from the top, and it'll be practically a model of what we're now seeing happen in Europe and the European Union.
The North American Union is absolutely being built. We know about the NAFTA superhighways. We know about the trade agreements that are being set up. We've seen a similar model already with the EU. So yeah, I think it's pretty clear.
15 years later, to the joy of cultural Marxists on the extreme left and corporate fascists on the extreme right, the results of NAFTA are in. Heroin, marijuana, and illegal immigrants are pouring in over the U.S.-Mexican border. More than 1 million jobs, once performed in the U.S., are now performed by Mexican workers at maquiladora plants. Among the major entities that championed NAFTA were the Council on Foreign Relations, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Heritage Foundation, the Brookings Institute, the New Republic, and the National Review. Among those who joined in opposing NAFTA were the following: Ross Perot, Pat Buchanan, Ralph Nader, the AFL-CIO, and the American people. Nevertheless, NAFTA passed. Did Congress care what the American people wanted? Obviously not.
Behind this are basically an international elites, many of whom would like to get control of the wealth and the power of the United States and transfer the decision-making authority for that to transnational governments and global governments, and taking that power and authority away from the American people. You have people in the United States who are anxious to merge this country with Mexico and Canada in sort of a North American Union, and then merge that with the European Union. And above that, who runs that? Just as the elites in Brussels and in Strasbourg are running the European Union, so you would have a global elite running the world economy, and the United States would simply be part of this enormously productive North American province of the global economy and of the world government.
There are groups, many of them I think, that are seeking to establish a new world order, a world government based on the model of collectivism. You can imagine who these people would be. The ones who control others benefit from a totalitarian system. In other words, politicians like collectivism, because collectivism puts ever-increasing power into their hands. Bankers like collectivism because it gives the banks the power to create money with state sanction and state support, to create money out of nothing, and that gives control over human beings. All of these people work together instinctively, even though they may have separate individual or professional goals. They do work together and support each other toward this ultimate aim of a new world order, is how they like to describe it, which is a totalitarian system based on the model of collectivism.
Indeed, free trade is not free at all. It's the serial killer of the American economy and the Trojan horse of world government. It's the primrose path to the loss of economic independence and national sovereignty the founders warned us about. Free trade is a bright, shining lie made possible by Marxists of the Frankfurt School and fascists of greedy multinationals. By failing to follow the Constitution, Americans have allowed multinational corporations to further their fascist agenda of globalization.